Once upon a time, amidst the staggering success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a palpable green-eyed envy began to creep through the boardrooms of rival studios. Universal Studios, custodians of the most iconic horror pantheon in cinema history, looked across the Hollywood landscape, saw Marvel raking in billions, and came to a simple, yet ultimately fatal conclusion. We've got monsters. We can do that. Thus was conceived the Dark Universe, a cinematic vision promising a sprawling, interconnected tapestry woven from the threads of Gothic terror. It wasn't just going to be a series of horror movies. It was pitched as a monster Avengers, a seductive, terrifying, action-packed world where Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Invisible Man, the Wolfman, and the Mummy all existed, stalked, and ultimately battled together. On paper, it was nothing short of brilliant. These characters weren't obscure comic book footnotes waiting for discovery. They were already global icons. The velvety menace of 1931's Dracula, the tragic, stitched-together soul of Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, the primal scream of Lon Chaney's Wolfman, these figures were the very DNA of horror cinema. Universal held the keys to a treasure chest of intellectual property that required no invention, no introduction. They didn't need to build a universe from scratch. They already owned the crown jewels. All they had to do was dust them off, polish them with care, and unleash them upon a new generation. But the fatal flaw wasn't in the idea. It was in Universal's desperate impatience. Marvel's success wasn't some overnight lottery win. It was a decade-long masterclass in slow-burn storytelling. From Iron Man's surprise triumph in 2008 to the emotional crescendo of Endgame in 2019, the MCU carefully nurtured its audience through 11 years and 22 films. Heroes were given time to breathe. Villains were given reasons to exist. By the time the Avengers assembled, it wasn't spectacle alone that drove audiences wild. It was investment. These were characters people had lived with, grown with, and come to love. Universal wanted the glory without the grind. They wanted the endgame money without the Iron Man patience. Instead of building a cathedral stone by stone, they tried to drop the spire on an empty lot and call it done. Their chosen starting gun was the 2017 reboot of The Mummy, fronted by Tom Cruise. This film was supposed to be the Dark Universe's Iron Man, the charismatic opening salvo that set the tone and launched the world. Instead, it played less like a beginning and more like a funeral. The Mummy didn't tell a story, it advertised one. It was terminally infected with franchise-itis, that chronic Hollywood disease where a film is so desperate to sell the next 5 sequels that it forgets to function as a movie on its own. Instead of curses, dread, and ancient evil, audiences were served clunky exposition and corporate world-building. What could have been an atmospheric horror adventure became a $125 million PowerPoint deck, disguised with sandstorms and Tom Cruise's sprinting. And the most unforgivable sin was the simplest one. They forgot the script. No amount of pyrotechnics or studio gloss can mask a hollow story. The 2017 Mummy was heavy on explosions and light on soul. It had spectacle, but no spine. Audiences don't fall for pixels. They fall for people. They want characters to care about, relationships to root for, arcs that matter. Instead, Universal gave them noise and expected love. As if that weren't enough, the movie dropped in Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll, yes, of Jekyll and Hyde fame, reduced to a glorified info dump. Instead of his own richly gothic period piece exploring his fractured psyche, he was shoved into The Mummy as the head of a monster-hunting organization called Prodigium, tasked with spoon-feeding audiences the franchise Bible. It was the Nick Fury gambit on steroids, except Marvel earned its Nick Fury moment after a complete story, not in the middle of one. Imagine pausing Tony Stark's cave escape in Iron Man to deliver a 10-minute seminar on the Avengers initiative. That's the scale of Universal's misstep. And yet, the wasted potential was heartbreaking. Jekyll could have had his own standalone masterpiece, a moody Victorian thriller drenched in fog and gaslight, showing how his curse kept him alive into the modern era. Dracula could have been reimagined as a lavish 19th century horror romance, dripping with seduction and blood. Frankenstein's monster could have wandered desolate landscapes in a tragic meditation on creation and abandonment. The Invisible Man could have terrorized polite society, an unseen menace in drawing rooms and foggy streets. Each monster could have owned their own tone, their own era, with only the faintest whispers tying them together. A newspaper clipping here, a ledger entry there. Fans would have gone wild piecing it all together. If Universal had truly been daring, they might have skipped the big screen altogether and leaned into prestige television. Imagine a dark universe anthology, each season dedicated to one monster, each set in their own time period. A whole season of Dracula, a whole season of Frankenstein, a whole season of Jekyll and Hyde. Over the years, these narratives could creep toward the present, slowly weaving together until, at last, the monsters collided in the modern age. It would have been slow burn storytelling at its finest, a counterpoint to Marvel's bombast, with gothic gravitas to match the studio's legacy. But Universal didn't want slow burn. They wanted fast cash, and the world saw through it. The infamous glossy cast photo of Tom Cruise, Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem, and Russell Crowe standing shoulder to shoulder like an undead boy band was supposed to announce the future of cinema. Instead, it became a meme graveyard. Critics shredded The Mummy, audiences shrugged, and Universal quietly pulled the plug, abandoning the entire venture after a single film. The Dark Universe became the shortest-lived cinematic universe in Hollywood history. And that's the real tragedy. The idea was sound. The monsters were timeless. The appetite was there. But Universal didn't want to build a masterpiece. They wanted to manufacture a cash cow. And audiences always know the difference. So here lies the Dark Universe, dead before it lived, buried not by its monsters, but by its own hubris.